Let's go live.
That's a signal.
That's a signal.
We're
live.
All
All right.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Good
morning.
I keep looking down there. I hope you all in Albany can hear us well. Just give us a nice wave just to make sure that you all can hear us. Oh, wonderful. Good. It's good to see all of us together. Welcome to our JJAG meeting, our March quarterlies of JJAG meeting. We're excited to kind of have everyone here. I want to start by acknowledging, that it's great for us to be back together in person. For me, particularly, I'm fascinated like this. I think that my first day as chair was actually Women's History Month. And to be back in person for me for the first time on Women's History Month again is fascinating, and with that, I want to acknowledge, yesterday being International Women's Day, that it's important for us to continue all of this work that we get to do in supporting the movements that are happening across the world and supporting all of our different communities. But in particular, I want to highlight the importance of the contributions of women and the work that we're getting to do, that we have a privilege of doing around juvenile justice reform. So I want to start with that as our welcome. So in starting this meeting, we want to add, we're going to do sort of get approval for the minutes, and then we're going to go through introductions. Yeah? Sure. Yeah? Yep. All right. So could I get a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes?
I motion to approve.
Michelle. Thank you. Second was, I don't know who spoke, but whoever said second, Nina. Thank Nina. You.
Michelle and Nina.
Yes. All right. All in favor? Say aye, yay, or raise your hand. Great. Any no's, any abstentions, any? No? All right, thank you. Agenda and minutes approved. So we know we have new members that we want to talk about, right? And so we wanted to sort of start with having our new members kind of introduce themselves, and then we'll do a quick round where we all kind of introduce ourselves, just give our names and what organizations or what we represent here as part of the JAG. So we'll have our new members start.
Sure. Why don't we start with Jenny Almanzar?
Yes. Hi, I'm Jenny Almanzar. I am the director of the Journey Project on Binghamton, New York, which is a family-based treatment program for children who've been impacted by childhood sexual abuse. We also serve children and adolescents with illegal and problematic sexual behavior and adults who sexually offend. So our role is to address trauma across all spectrums, including with children who exhibit problematic and illegal sexual behavior. Oh, and I'm also a trainer and consultant for the National Center on the Sexual Behavior of Youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for sharing. Thank you for being here.
Great. And I think in Albany we have our new OCFS commissioner, Suzanne.
Oh, okay. Oh, we're good. I'll just yell. Good morning, Suzanne Miles-Gustav, Acting Commissioner at OCFS. So happy to be here. Been with the agency for almost 10 years, but in this role for about 2 months, so it's exciting, and happy to join you. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us, our new OCFS Commissioner, for Jenny also joining us. I know it's a little bit of a long process at times to get new members on board, but we're always excited, not only sort of having new members, but also the different levels of expertise that gets to be brought in. And I think as a JAG, the greater depth and diversity of all of this, I think it's really helpful for all of us. To kind of help support us, so our new members also get to know us, if we could do a quick round of intro, and perhaps we start on the Albany side first, and then we'll come over to the New York City side.
Hi, I'm Annette Harris. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Administration and Staffing.
Good morning. I'm Alan Riley, Chairman of State Commission of Corrections.
Good morning. I'm Robert Macron. I'm Deputy Commissioner at DCJS, in charge of the Office of Probation Correctional Alternatives. And I'm just getting over a cold, so I'm putting my mask on. Thank you.
I am Judge Brenda Friedman. I'm an Erie County Family Court judge.
I hear both all of the JD cases and the youth park cases for the county.
Good morning. I'm Nina Aladort. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at OCFS, the Office of Children and Family Services, over the Division of Youth Development and Partnerships for Success. And I oversee all of the detention and STSJP funding and work with the PYJ as well. Suzanne, ready to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Is that it?
Anybody else?
Anybody else? Yeah. Because we can't see the full, I think the camera, in case there is somebody else on Suzanne's side. No? All right. Nope.
You just want the JAG members or everybody in the room?
Oh, yeah, everyone in the room. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Emily Natilio, Research Director in the Office of Justice Research and Performance here at DCJS. Hi, everyone. I'm Gisela Lopez, Executive Director, Youth Justice Institute. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Krista Dean, Chief of Criminal Justice Program Planning and Development in the Office of Youth Justice at DCJS.
Letitia Holly, DCJS Office of Justice.
Hi, I'm Sandy Singer. I work in the Office of Program Development and Funding. So the grantees, the data scientists, documents, I'm here with Laura. Still learning the project. I'm Kristen Hines. I'm the new PM.
Did you tell them we can't
hear? Yeah, we can't hear the last two or three people we couldn't hear.
Yeah, I'm Tiffany Hines. I'm the new Public Safety Grants Representative 1 with OPDS.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dan Koss. I'm with the New York State Unified Court System, and I'll be presenting today about the results.
Good morning, Megan Armstrong, Office of Youth Justice. Good morning, Shalane Garcia, Office of Youth Justice.
I think that's Diana.
And Diana just joined.
Hi, I'm Diana Palmer. Is there a prompt or just our name? Because I'm just
what you do.
I'm a city council member for the city of Glens Falls, New York, and a therapist in private practice.
All right, thank you, Albany, so much for introducing. Let's New York side. Want to start more on the?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name's Maura Gagan. I work for Division of Criminal Justice Services in the Grants Unit.
Hello, everyone. I'm Edwina Richardson Mendelson. I am statewide Deputy Chief Administrative Judge for Justice Initiatives. It's a long title for a good reason. Excuse me. I oversee our state court system's access to justice programming, our judiciary civil legal services programming, our policy work in child welfare and family justice, as well as juvenile, adolescent, and emerging adult justice, and our policy and planning, which oversees our 340 plus problem solving courts, our mental health courts, our juvenile courts, our drug courts, our opioid courts, mental health courts, etc. And I'm leading our court system's race, equity, and gender fairness work for the state court system.
Thank you.
And we issued a new report that I'm sending to you all yesterday, a year in review on how we're doing our court.
Thank you.
I'm Precious Lugo. I'm from Buffalo. I work with Olive Tree Family Services, formerly known as Family Child Advocacy Network. We closed after or during COVID, but we're a nonprofit where we help youth skill build with youth, whether that be in the community, the home, or the schools.
Nyasia. I'm a community organizer in Buffalo, New York.
My name is Precious Farrell. I work at WJCS in Mount Vernon as an employment specialist. I'm also a district leader, and I am a JAG member.
Hi, good morning. Good to be here in community with each and every one of you. Michelle Diaz, she, her. As for my job, I'm a director for a national organization where we focus primarily on gender justice all across the country. And I'm happy to be here. I'm also a JAG member.
Good. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'm Euphemia Strawn. I am the CEO of Families on the Move of New York City, Inc. We are a family-run and operated family and youth peer support agency that provides services in the New York City Children's Center, South Beach Psychiatric, Astor Children and Families, and 3 community residence programs for the Jewish Board. Our staff consists of family and youth peer advocates, and we also, in addition to advocacy, peer support, we provide trainings and educational workshops for families, providers, and the community. And I'm glad to be a JAG member.
Oh, goodness, we're one-upping each other. I love it.
Yes. Good morning to everybody in Albany. Good morning to everybody here. Good to see everybody. My name is Damon Baycoat. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Youth Justice at DCJS.
Tom Andriola, Chief of Policy and Implementation for the Office of Youth Justice.
And I am Eddie Fergus. I am a professor at Rutgers University in the Newark campus in urban education. My research work has always focused on disproportionality in discipline, and with a particular focus around its disparate impact on boys and men of color. And I am a super proud JAG member for now 13 years. So
wow.
Yes. So I'm excited to be here with you all, and to be in community, as Michelle highlighted. I think it's, this is such a unique opportunity for us to sit as advisors in the work that the state is getting to do around juvenile justice reform. And I love that, there's so much diversity of sort of content and expertise in this room that we're able to kind of really support and drive the work across the state. So with that being said, welcome everyone. We have quite a few agenda items that we need to talk through as JAG. So I'm going to turn it to Tom to talk about the open meetings. Right?
Yeah. Yep. Hi everyone. So we recently received some clarity, some information on the open meetings law that we wanted to review very quickly here. In order to attend remotely an open meeting and count toward a quorum and be able to vote, you would have to disclose your location and have it be accessible to the public.
Can you say more on that? What does it mean? Like the correct address, just like, oh, Queens, New York, something like that? No.
No, the actual location. So there are some new provisions. There are also some new provisions regarding extraordinary circumstances. But the JAG would have to take action to define exactly what that means. We would have to do a resolution and hold a hearing for public comment if we would like to, as a board, offer the opportunity for members to participate under extraordinary circumstances, which is really, the guidelines really talk about illness, caring for a loved one. It's pretty limited in what the provisions say. The JAG can put some other items in there, but again, it's open to public comment and a hearing. So that would drive the result. And even if we do adopt the resolution for that, you would not count towards a quorum if you participated under that circumstance, but you could vote. So that's basically in a nutshell what it is. So we do like to stress the importance kind of going forward of, being able to attend as much as possible, either at this location in New York City or at the location in Albany. So I'll just leave it at that for a moment and see if there are any questions or anybody wants to talk about potentially putting a resolution together and doing a hearing for that.
Yeah, I think this is very, I think they're, the disclosing location, I think, it's because it's a public meeting, right? The idea of sort of the public sort of having a sense of where individuals are located. I think it raises some potential safety concerns.
Right.
Right. So that feels a little very uncomfortable, right? But the idea of sort of providing or creating a resolution, like should we talk about, like, are there things that we would potentially want to?
I don't think the address should have to be disclosed. I feel like if you're saying, like, for example, I'm in Harlem right now, like, and then I guess maybe communicate with one of the higher ups, like, okay, this is where I am, or this is why I can't make it, then that should just suffice for it.
Right.
Because if we end up putting the minutes out to the public to read, like, they could see I'm at 125th Street or something, and that might be where I live. Now everybody has access to my address, so.
I mean, this is live, right? On YouTube? Or
This
I
is-
think I've seen it.
This is live, yeah. I think the intent is to have, from the law, is to have meetings that are open to the public, kind of like we do here and in Albany. And I guess the idea is that, let's say you're traveling, let's say Judge Friedman was traveling, didn't want to travel from Buffalo, but she has an office in Buffalo, not her personal home, right? Then at that office, you might be able to disclose that and have that be open to the public.
Okay.
Which also presents a security concern.
I'm getting ready to go right there. I'm going to get ready to go right there because I sit on several state level committees, and there's one committee in particular that, not as much as it used to, but it used to get a lot of negative response from people in the papers and everything, even though it's changed, the perception is changing as that agency has been doing the work. And people have said some things that, may not be true and are not true. But I think that it puts people who are in the know of different things, and they see your name and they know you're involved in something else.
Right.
And I think that poses a security concern for me.
Yeah. I have a question. So every year we file, I forgot the name of it.
Financial disclosure.
And that is open to the public, or is that closed? Because, like, if we do that every year, I put my address, so regardless of it.
I put my work. I put this address. I think I used the address for the committee.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah,
then I need to change my address.
I'm not sure that the general public can see your file.
I think they can see if you filed or not, but they can't see the information on it.
Okay.
But I used the DCJS information, and my other committees, I use their main address information.
I would say, honestly, I feel either way, because, I'm not in, I like to attend things in person. I think that the only ones that I attend virtual was because we have no other choice, right? So I want to put that out there that I don't feel strongly about it. I do agree a lot with people if they want to have the option to do it and not disclose. That is a big concern. But as well, like with COVID, the aftermath, like everybody's moving remote as well, or at least halfway. So it would be so nice to have that option. But again, I feel either way.
And I do sit on committees where, it's televised for people to see it, but we're in that location for the agency that's hosting the meeting.
Albany, any comments or thoughts? We lost the video feed, so we're not sure if anybody may be trying to jump in or.
Yeah, this is Judge Friedman. My biggest concern is weather. So when I heard the exceptions, I didn't hear that one, but we've had some major weather in Buffalo, and if it had corresponded with one of these meetings, I would have wanted the opportunity to participate electronically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think weather is definitely a factor that could be integrated into the resolution and to the exceptions. And then it would really be your choice whether you wanted to disclose your office location or not, which would determine whether you would count as part of the quorum or not.
But you still have the ability to vote.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So what you just said is, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. If you do disclose your location, then you count, and you're participating
distally through video or a phone, then you count as part of the quorum?
If it's disclosed and accessible to the public.
Okay, so what does that mean, accessible to the public? Because like the buildings that we're in right now, you have to have your name on a list, right? Both. So can we get more clarity on what accessible to the public actually means in practice?
That is fine. Yes, if it means that you get onto the security list, that's accessible, because we would have to let those people in. If the public wanted to attend this meeting here in New York City or in 348 in Albany, we have to let them in, and that's accessible to the public.
So if I did it from my office at OCFS, that's one thing. If I did it from my home,
Something you want the public in your home.
Not
you wouldn't want to do it. You wouldn't want to do it in your home. No. But in your office, if you had a conference room in your office, and you would, I mean, look at this meeting here. We don't have anybody who's requested to come in to either one of these locations, so it is fairly rare that a member of the public would show up and want to come in. I think in my time here of 12 years, I've seen it maybe once or twice, but it has to be available for them to count towards the quorum and be able to vote.
This is Diana. From my perspective, I think it's worth considering passing the resolution. Nobody would be required to do this. So if anyone's uncomfortable with disclosing an address, you would never have to. But I think on other boards that I'm on, it's been very helpful if someone, for example, has COVID and they're not really ill, they can participate, but they don't want to infect others, or extreme weather. It's nice to have, as a tool to use, but it wouldn't require anybody to participate who didn't want to. So I think it's worth it.
Yeah. And this is state, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can go back and we can explore opportunities for what the resolution could look like, what the exceptions could be, and bring it back to the JAG.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you so much, Tom. So next we want to move to funding proposals and updates, particularly our funding update.
That's me, right?
That is more. That is more.
Good morning, everybody. Again, my name's Maura. In your packets or your emails, I'm going to talk about the chart that has the blue header. It's our current funding levels for our Title II Formula Federal Award. So if you see, this has all our current funding years. Right now we have everything from 2017 to 2022 available to us. And that is good news. As you may remember, in the past couple of years, we've had some SAG compliance issues, and the sanctuary city litigation, all of that's in the past. So all of this money is free and available to fund and allocate. So you'll see we have a total right now of about 5.2 million available. It's about 1.3 on the state share and about 3.9 on the local share. And just to let everyone know, state share funding is the expenses that are the RED work and the compliance monitoring work that SCOC does to us. That's the biggest chunk of our state share funding. A lot of times we'll transfer the state share down to local share, because that's where we spend most of the money, really, is on the local share of things. Sometimes we have other state share spending, such as that conference that was voted on last time. That'll be a state share expense because it's DCJS putting on the conference. And so above the black line, that's all the federal awards, the amounts, balances. Below the black line is our current commitments. So that's everything right now that this board has voted on and that is actively working at running right now, such as the Youth Justice Institute, or things that are still in the planning phases, like the Equity Champions and Healing the Practitioner. And the conference is underway, the planning for that as well. And the mentoring for Big Brothers, Big Sisters, those are hopefully going to start soon. We're still waiting for some procurement approvals on that. anybody has any questions?
So we are in compliance now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Fully in compliance.
Wow.
Very excited.
After how long?
Right, yeah.
It's been years. I feel like it's been, no, year.
It's been a while.
2 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
2 years.
Wow.
We had to wait for Jenny to be appointed here as the victim advocate.
Glad I could help.
And so and I'm gonna just to reiterate. So we have 5.2 available
Yes.
for us in terms of looking at applications, and this is through 22, right?
Our federal
Our current,
year.
Yeah,
Yep.
our current federal year.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep. And federal year 23, that will apply for that funding this spring. Usually the applications come out in the spring and the money's awarded in the fall. So 2023 is not that far behind.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yep.
in my head. I'm like, wait a second, this is up to 22. We're at 23.
Yep. So probably another 2 million. We won't know the award amount till it's released in September, October, but you can probably count on another 2 million that'll be available soon.
I have a question, but I don't know if it's the right time right now. I don't know if it really goes straight to the Workings Grant Committee or group.
Yeah.
Okay, so how are we doing? So thinking we have $5.2 million available. How do we spend that? And is it just the working groups coming in, oh, this is what we want to do it, or is there any way possible where we can open up something like an RFP and ask community members to apply or do something like that?
Right.
Because we do have money.
Yeah. Well, and then part of our conversation that I think we want to start putting into as we think about strategic plan moving forward is reflecting on, well, where are we with what we already said we were going to do in our strategic plan? And for lack of a better term, like, where are we in terms of checking off like our movement towards that? Because I think you're right. There may be, given the fact that we have these dollars, where may there be holes that we haven't yet been able to kind of target in terms of our strategic plan that we do want to prioritize, and then brainstorming what is it that we want to do? What would be reflective of that? I think our strategic plan, we put down some really great ideas of where we wanted to go. I think we've just had a lot of interruptions over the last couple of years in terms of being able to get to those things. And so I think part of it is what are the ideas that we have? Because the grants working group is still in a place where we still want more ideas, and for the DCJS staff to kind of help in that cultivating those ideas.
I would love to be part of the grants working group now, moving onward. So I don't know who should I talk to add me to the agenda.
Yeah, no, I think you would.
I'm not. I'm not. Yeah, I upped out.
That's what.
And now there's money. Now there's money. I want to make sure it goes to the community.
I thought I had written you down anyway.
That's likely.
And also thinking about some of the, as we think about, Judge Edmondson, in terms of like what you were just describing around the report that's being released, like where are the opportunities of synergy around that's happening that we can also be, and so I'm glad you're going to share that report because I think there may be an opportunity for us.
Do that right now, then.
And other agencies where, and work that's happening, that where are the collaborative opportunities that we could, take as a JAG in continuing to support some of that work. Yeah. So.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Can I just ask a question, just so I'm really clear about thinking sort of forward about the funding? The obligation for the RED coordinator and the compliance monitoring, those are annual expenditures, correct? So we have about, of the $2 million grant annually, what is available for grants is approximately 1.5. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
What was that amount again?
I'm sorry?
What was the amount? What is available for?
About 1.5 million
for
funding all the projects, yeah. When you take away the RED work and the SEOC work.
1.5 you said, right? Okay, thanks.
Every year, going forward, regardless of what's sort of floating around and that we haven't spent, we know that there's about 1.5 that's available because 500 is allocated as a requirement. I just want to make sure I was thinking about this correctly.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you for the clarification, Nina. It really helps a lot.
And then, there's always turn back on awards too. So
some of those commitments that we have, you can always plan on some of the money coming back to us hopefully we can reprogram.
Okay. Great.
Which is always tough, especially when the turn back comes late.
Yes.
Because you don't want
What is turn back?
It's money that the grantees didn't spend.
Okay.
If we give them a contract for a year,
Understood.
It's very rare that a grantee spends the full grant amount in a year. It's shocking. You think I wouldn't have any trouble spending money?
Well, there are limits on how we spend our money.
Yes, the strings attached make it very hard to spend the money. That's common amongst all federal funding streams.
Understood.
Other comments, thoughts regarding our funding status?
I feel good.
I feel good about the money, about finding out that we have compliance to be here.
It's definitely, it's a good place to be 2 years ago. Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maura, for the update. We're going to go to conference.
Trista.
Oh, is Trista down there?
Yeah.
At the end of the table. At the end of the table. Trista, you're up. You're going to share around the Equity and Healing Conference. There she is.
Excuse me. Hi, everyone. This is just gonna, don't mean to yell right in your ear. This is just gonna be a quick update. We know that there was a lot of conversation and discussion around the Healing and Equity Conference that you all had approved at the last JAG meeting. So we have set up a conference planning committee to plan what that will look like. We do have dates held in October, just because we know that calendars get very, very crazy. And so those dates are the 18th and 19th of October. The goal is to, we have 18th and 19th of October. But the planning committee will meet next week on the 15th, and we did send the invite out to some folks who had indicated they were interested last time. So we have a planning, again, that committee meeting is actually our friends at the YJI have agreed to host us. So that meeting is set for the 15th. I think it's 10:30 to noon. And so if you didn't get it or you got the email invite and you're like, oh, I forgot to respond, reach out. But that first meeting is set for the 15th at 10:30, and we'll keep you all posted around what that planning process will look like, what the conference will be looking like.
So Trista, can I ask a question about, other than JAG members, who else was invited to be part of the planning?
I knew you were gonna ask me that. Well, not you, maybe. I think someone, so we have some of our admin staff who are really great at making sure we're getting all of our planning done. I believe we're also having a PAC member.
Yes.
Participate in the planning process.
But were there any people from the PYJ who don't sit at this? I mean, I'm just thinking about the alignment of those two groups.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it.
PYJ is Partnership for Youth Justice.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Judge.
I can reach out to folks. I can reach out to see if anybody is interested. We can reach out.
When is the meeting again? Next Thursday?
The 15th. The 15th. Yes.
It is the
10:30
15th at 10:30.
Are you there?
No. Yeah. I'm hoping I can make one of them at some point. Any other questions?
Send me the invite. Trista, this is Michelle.
Okay, we're in person. I'll still send you the invite. We're in person. We'll see about maybe a text if we need to, but right now I think we're scheduled to be in person, but I'll send you the invite.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
That changes.
All right.
So you said it's the 15th from 10 to 12?
10:30 to 12 at the YJI. Youth Justice Institute. For those. Great.
Wonderful. Thank you, Trista. Oh, go ahead.
I think she said that's it for her.
Oh, okay. It is hard.
It is hard.
I know, right? Thank you for that update. So now we're going to move to the Community Resolve Program, which I think we have in our packet, but we also have.
Yes, sir. Yep. And that'll be Dan Koss over in Albany. Yep.
Confirm that you guys can see the presentation?
It's
Not
It looks
yet.
like, it looks like it's trying to come in.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. Yeah, it's not. It's not coming through the screen here. But I do think everybody has a copy in their packets. If you want to just tell us what slide you're on.
Yeah, for those who are online. Yeah.
Tom, can you all hear me down there?
Yes.
We can hear you, but we're seeing your back.
Yeah, that's a problem with this setup, but I'm occasionally looking your direction. Well, thank you so much for making the time on the agenda today to hear about the Community Resolve Program. My main purpose today is to come here and thank you all for the financial support and the technical assistance support that the JJAG offered us 3 years ago.
There we go.
When we started the Community Resolve Program. And thanks to the support of this group, we were able to really get the program off the ground and learn a great deal over the last 3 years. I want to tell you all about that and give you a sense of what our plan is going forward with Community Resolve. So that's the goal of today. So if you're on the slide with today's agenda, I want to give you an overview of what the Community Resolve Program is, the timelines and major milestones for illustrate what we do through some case examples, and give you that sense of that future direction. So,
I have you on presenter camera, so now I can see you if you want to face this way. That's fine.
wait, there?
Yeah, we got you right there. There you go. Turn around. That way.
You face off.
There you go.
Hi, Dan.
Okay, so let me start with what are we talking about, this idea of Community Resolve. So Community Resolve was really the vision of then Commissioner Bermudez at the New York City Department of Probation. She was someone who had a great vision and commitment to the use of restorative justice in the day-to-day interaction between probation officers and people that they were serving, and also wanted to bring restorative services into the service we would have or under their supervision. And so rooted in RJ principles, Community Resolve was there to help young people reflect on what they had done, think about how they could make amends and repair the situation, and also the community could be healed from what had happened. So that was the Commissioner's vision, and the initial vision was to focus on 16 and 17-year-olds after raise age legislation passed, and focusing also on person-to-person offenses. So things like assault and burglary, opposed to things like vandalism. So the initial vision was, how can we repair the harm done in offenses? So specifically, to illustrate kind of what does that look like, there were three kind of buckets of services. One bucket of services had to do with things that a young person could do to reflect on and perhaps work towards repairing harm caused. And examples of those services are on slide number 4. They include things like, and I'll just take a minute to explain each if they're not things that you're familiar with, conflict coaching, which is a one-on-one 3-hour intervention where someone is led through a series of questions that helps them reflect on the situation. helps them understand perhaps some of the decisions that they've made, and also helps them make plans for moving forward. We have mediation, which you may all be familiar with, where a small group, 2 to 3 people, can get together, talk about what happened, discuss how they've been impacted, make plans for the future. We'll have an example of a family mediation shortly. Restorative circles, a chance for people who have something in common to get together and talk about things that are important. The way that played out in our program is we started every adjustment process in certain boroughs started with a circle. Probation officer, the parent, the young person, someone else from the department would lead a circle to get to know each other, to connect on an interpersonal level, to educate them about the services that probation had to offer, and to give young people and parents some choice in what services they thought would make a difference for them. Sometimes apology letters were part of what was offered. If the young person wasn't ready to meet face-to-face with the person they caused harm to, they could write an apology letter. And restorative questions, a restorative dialogue where we ask questions like, what happened? What were you thinking about at that time? Who has been harmed, and how can we make things right? And that kind of reflective process that gets someone thinking about and processing that. So those were all services that were very much focused on the young person. But we were equally, as the restorative justice web teaches us, equally as interested in making sure that victims also receive the attention. And so every victim who was associated with one of these cases, that was the first contacting the victim. And just hearing their story, if they were interested in sharing how they've been impacted, what happened to them, what they're struggling with at the time. Both to give them an outlet to be able to express that, as well as to connect them to services, help them navigate some of the sometimes difficult, connect them to people who can help. And sometimes a victim wasn't willing to meet with the person who caused the harm, but they were willing to write what's called a victim impact statement, where they could say, when this happened to me, I want you to understand what's happened in my life since then. And sometimes that letter was shared with the young person, and sometimes not, depending on their ability to, their maturity in being able to get that. And finally, what was always envisioned as the most desirable outcome was a restorative conference. And for those who aren't familiar, a restorative conference brings together a larger group of people who have been impacted by the offense. So perhaps there was an offense between a young person and an adult person in the community, but chances are there have been other people who were impacted. Maybe the person who was harmed has a spouse. Maybe there was a neighbor who saw all of this and has also been impacted and is now worried about their safety. Maybe the parent of the young person has been impacted. You know, once you start to see what the ripple effect is, you see that there are more and more people who have real impact from that harm. We bring that whole group together and we go through those questions about what happened, what were people thinking, who's been harmed and how, and what would make things right. And that kind of direct interaction is leads to all sorts of very creative ways that people think of to repair them and build relationships. We find that when we get people in conference, they realize they have lots more in common than they ever knew, and they also realize they have many more resources to bring to bear to ultimately support them. So those were the kind of range of services and the kind of 3 buckets that we envisioned. So before I share about the timeline, let me pause and see if there's any questions in the room here or down in New York City. Anything I can clarify that would help you kind of really understand the services we were trying to provide here.
I actually have a question. How did the impacted families come to be part of it? Does someone reach out to them, or do they initiate it?
Well, the victims are known. And so at the time when probation gets the case from family court, the victim's contact information is included. And by that point down in New York City, the victim has already been contacted by victim services, typically say Verizon down in New York City. So there's already been, after the time of the arrest, there's already been a system contact to the victim, and then we're making an additional contact through probation.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Any other questions that would help you imagine this? Okay, keep going. If you have a question, just interrupt. So who did we work with? Of course, our main partner was New York City Probation, so I'm on slide 5. And we worked with our 4 community dispute resolution centers. So those of you who might not be familiar with that, resolution centers are dispute resolution centers that the court system pays through contracts to provide services for courts, as well as preventative services in the community. Their services are typically free. We have 20 partner agencies. We do about 20 to 25,000 cases a year. That can be everything from civil small claims cases to custody visitation cases to schoolwork, really a broad array of services. And these are our 4 providers in New York City. And the vision that the commissioner had with us was that we wanted our local agency. We wanted our Bronx agency working on Bronx cases. We wanted our Queens agency working on cases. So we found a way to engage all 4 of our partners. One of them, 2 boroughs. That's why there's 4, not 5. So then our timeline, I'm on page 6. We started in, or slide 6, we started in fall 2019 and really spent the fall hiring, training DOP staff, training the new community resolve staff, and developing strong linkages to victim services. So that once we started talking to victims, we had some place that we could make a warm referral to. Then in 2020, it was a fun time to start. Major events, we had COVID happening, and also very early in the year, our main point of contact at the Department of Probation left, or unexpectedly. So there was quite a bit of rejiggering, because our original vision was to have CRI staff in the probation offices every day at a desk, side by side with the colleagues who were going to refer them cases. But of course, that vision never really came to pass for more than a few weeks, because then we went to a virtual world. And I think we were trying to figure that out with probation as well. And so that really led to a year of what I would call local experimentation. You know, what is going to work? This also coincided with, of course, a significant decrease in arrests. And so just like the volume was different than projected and the service delivery method was different than projected. And really since then, there's been this incremental movement away from these virtual interactions and more in person. But it was very stressful. So I don't want to say 2020 was a lost year, because a lot of the experimentation we had is what helped drive the program model in the following year. So if you look at 2021, you'll see the development of citywide adjustment tracks. And so to formalize the program, what the folks at probation decided to do was, after an initial meeting with families, they would have a choice. You could go down what was called the traditional track. This might be an opportunity for mentoring. It might be an opportunity for the cognitive therapy. It might be an opportunity for job training, whatever is typically available there. Or you could go down what was called the restorative or healing track. The restorative track included that suite of service I mentioned, the mediation, the conflict coaching, the circles, and potentially a conference. So basically there was this desire to give individuals choice. And so that's how they decided in 2021 to go with these tracks. We also started doing those adjustment circles, the ones I explained to you at the very beginning of the process, to help parents, the child to connect with the probation officer in a personal kind of way with the help of a social process. And also, I think that was notable, thanks to Bob and his team at DCJS, was our CRI staff was able to get involved with training for motivational interviewing, which ended up being incredibly helpful because we were having a challenging time getting folks to choose things like conferences or mediation, which in our opinion is the kind of hardest thing to say yes to, which is own up to what you did and face the impact that actually happened. And so the motivational interviewing training was really helpful to actually find self-motivated, internally motivated. And we also worked on developing incentives, because the incentive structures for a while were that conference was an additional thing you did in addition to these things like the cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever else you were assigned. And that was creating a barrier because we didn't want to over-program folks. We were just harder for them to say yes because it was just. And we decided with that tracking device was to create an incentive that it was actually, if you did this, it may be the only thing you had to do, and you might be done sooner. And so we tried to put some of those carrots out there structurally to create the motivation to try what we consider to be a pretty hard option. And then in 2022, I'll just share that there was a real focus on getting more cases to the conference. Prior to 2022, we had only had 2 cases go to conference. We don't see that as a failure because people were participating in these mediations, they were participating in the conflict coaching services, but probation really wanted to establish a proof of concept that we could get folks to conference. So starting in June 2022, they said, let's go, it wasn't quite true, but conference or bust. Our goal was conference, if we did other stuff, that'd be okay. But if we weren't 100% going conference first as the sell, as opposed to making that just one of the options we could choose. And I think we found success in that. Since June, we ended up doing about 8 conferences, and conferences are a lot of work. So even though 8 sounds like a small number, each conference requires a tremendous amount of pre-work, and I think that they were satisfied with that proof of concept. And finally, the decision was made to go to a single provider. So one of the things I'll talk about shortly is our fee that went out. We decided instead of engaging all 4 of our partners, that it was difficult to manage the perspective of the program that have so many people to interface with. And so a single provider model is something that we decided to move to. And then the last thing is there's a tremendous amount of training for DOP staff, both in restorative principles to those restorative conversations.
Dan, I have a question.
Yes.
Did you have any difficulty getting the victims to participate?
Absolutely. So that you know, it's not just the young person, it's the victim who frequently, a week or 2 after this has happened, is not particularly ready. What we found, and this was inspired by our colleagues in Washington, D.C. who run a similar program, is that it's continued victim engagement over multiple contacts that get someone comfortable with actually doing it. So the initial conversation with the victim now, we thought originally, you talk to them and you pitch them this idea and they want to do it. No. The first is, we just want to hear your story. How can we help? The second is, how are you doing? Are there any of these services that can help you? And we're not even talking to them now about conference until maybe the 3rd or 4th contact. And yet we've got this probation. And so we're trying to, that's been one of the shifts. So we find when we really focus just on relationship support and as a conference later, we're having more success getting victims.
And who is the one contacting the victim? The probation officer? No. Okay.
The CRI staff. So as much as they're doing talking with the parents, thing is, sometimes the victim, the idea of this person who's caused harm and been harmed, or victim and offender, dichotomy is not that clear. A lot of times, especially with an assault on youth assault, both people what happened. And so that's another complicating factor, is that it's not always quite so clear as like one person has been harmed and another person. And I think we're still learning, quite honestly, what to do in those situations, because it doesn't fit the traditional. Does that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Other questions before I just tell you a couple stories and illustrate how this is helpful? Just checking down in New York City, can see you all. Any questions down there? Okay, I'm going to keep moving then. Let me tell you about two stories. So the first example on slide 7 is a family mediation. Here's the situation. The 17-year-old, he started missing school. He's changed his social patterns. He's staying out late. He's missing his curfew. His mom is worried about him. One night he comes home. He's been using some sort of substance. Mom is kind of at her wit's end. She grabs his phone away from him, says, you know, from now on, you can't go out at all on Friday nights for the next month. He is visibly upset, pushes mom down on the ground, and begins to kick her. Younger sibling is in the house, gets between them, kind of physically able to separate them. But mom is at her wit's end. Mom doesn't know what to do right now. She wants to teach him a lesson, and she calls the cops. Cops come, make the arrest. So we know now that he doesn't have a place to go, and this idea of what he's going to do in this interim period is really complicated. Can he live at home, and does he have to live with friends? So we even have this kind of housing question mark over it. We end up doing a family mediation where all three are involved: the younger sibling, the 17-year-old, and the mom. And they have a chance to talk about what happened. We have a chance to understand.
I'm sorry, we're having trouble hearing now. It's getting progressively worse. It's almost as if we hear paper crackling near a microphone.
Okay. I'm going to do better. Where can I start off so you didn't miss something? Where's the last part that was clear?
Sounds like a robot.
Is this better?
You're breaking up there.
We don't hear you. You're frozen now.
Yeah.
Okay. Going louder is going to be rough on the ears in this room. Is this better?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay. So the family, after this incident, didn't agree to try mediation. We spent time individually before the mediation talking to each of the parties, preparing them, letting them know and letting them think about and reflect on what was important for them to say to each other. And eventually, after talking together in joint session, they decided on some house rules. They reinforced some norms that they had around curfew, and that there were really kind of, I don't know how else to say it, there was apologies and there was tears and there was hugs because they wanted to be in right relationship. The mom also got to understand why the child was missing school now, and they were able to address those issues. So I know I'm giving you kind of a broad overview, just want to kind of maintain some level of confidentiality that we have with these cases. But there were some really compelling reasons why the child was missing school.
It went bad again.
Any thoughts here?
It was good for a minute.
I know.
Try.
All right, I'm going to use this as my own personal mic. Is this better?
We're not hearing you there.
No.
It's not you. Yeah, it's not you.
Okay.
All right, we're getting TA.
Well, if it's clear on YouTube, it's coming from here.
Oh, so there's
on their end.
Tom, can you hear us?
Now, yeah, but it's going in and out. So right when you just said that, it was clear, but then it becomes choppy and we're losing your camera too.
Yeah, you guys look to be out. Ours seems to be.
Yeah, you're out too.
You guys anymore.
Amanda can't hear us either.
Amanda can't hear?
No.
You just came back.
hear us
This is
now?
Amanda.
Oh,
I can hear you.
She says so. She's back on now too. She can hear you.
All right, is this better? Can you hear me now?
Every second or third word.
They're clear on YouTube. Want to try again?
Okay, how does this sound? Can you hear me now, Ron? Is this better?
It's not great, but it's not great, but it's okay.
Are you guys on mute? If you guys are on mute, it might help.
I'll put it on mute.
Okay, good idea.
Okay, are we muted, yeah? All right, I'm gonna keep going. Down there, just unmute and let us know if you can hear. So one of the other interesting things that came out of the mediation was that part of the disconnect that was happening for the 17-year-old boy was that his mom, who was a single mom, was starting to see someone else. And there was a new boyfriend in the picture who was at the house, and he just didn't like spending time at the house at the same time that the boyfriend was, and that was part of it. So there's things like that that are relational that people sometimes discover, and they can just change their patterns of interacting with each other. And so those are some of the things they ended up making decisions around.
What was the time between the time of arrest and the time of mediation?
It was 2 weeks. It was very quick. It came together very quick because at their initial adjustment meeting, they decided that they wanted to do it. And that's the good news about the CRI services, except for a conference, which has a really long build-up time with preparing everyone. Something like a mediation, a conflict coaching, that could be scheduled in a matter of days. Let me tell you about a restorative conference we did, a very different situation. We had a business owner who owned a UPS store type of thing, where they mailboxes and mail being sent there. And two young people, a 13 and 15-year-old, second time in 1 week came, they busted a gate, and they stole 2 packages that they thought were going to be sneakers. At least that's what they said. So the storekeeper called the police, they were arrested, and when we talked to the victim, the store owner, he said, literally, I want my pound of flesh. I want them punished. It was the second time it had happened. It caused great inconvenience for him to call his customers and let him know packages had been stolen. And now his staff members were kind of like fearing for their safety twice in 1 week.
We're not hearing anything again.
I wonder if someone should call and do like a speakerphone
They keep on going in and out.
Does this microphone help?
No.
Sounds like they're underwater.
Someone call Tom and put it on speaker.
They are, we are wrong.
Yeah.
Can't even put the words together. There you go.
Dan is a consummate mediator. Look at the smile on his face, even despite the technical glitches. He freezes in calm and equanimity.
Is there a phone number on that spider phone there somewhere? On that?
This?
On that, yeah.
No, but you do have 19 missed calls.
I
guess they heard that way.
No, there's no number though.
Becoming my new gig.
I know.
Figuring out how we're
can
gonna.
call the, I'll call the IT person.
Call you or something. That's what we're gonna do. That's what we're doing.
Wow.
Wow.
Interesting. It's like you're actually.
Tom is calling the IT person up here to see.
So it's through the phone for our town. Okay, so.
Is he muted?
No, he's on. It's on.
Gotta love technology. And especially given COVID, we still can't get it right.
Hello, I'm
Yeah,
sorry I
good to
didn't
see
do
you.
that earlier.
It's ironic because it would be better if we're all in WebEx.
Right.
We don't have these problems.
Okay. And then what will you do from there? All right. Thank you. All right. I'm gonna email the link.
You know, I would be interested in knowing what type of extracurricular activities they have for the youth in these communities. Like more of a preventive thing instead of after the fact. You know, something to keep them occupied with some type of supervision where they could go to do things that are constructive.
I would say
Nowhere
more
is there
like
enough
after
of that.
school. Yeah, I would
No.
say more after school funding just as a
It
start.
could be after school.
Even during school,
I was
because
gonna
a
say
lot of
even
kids.
during school, study hall.
Yeah,
They have that
something.
new
Because
AIS
that's where it
thing
starts.
now.
A lot of kids don't like grasp the concept of, okay, let me go to class, let me do this, let me do that, or they get it, but they just get bored. So instead of roaming the halls, put something in place where it's like something to keep their attention, also not get them into trouble, stuff like that.
And, you know, some community-based type programs
Definitely.
where they could go. I know when I was growing up, we had the UBA, United Block Association, and they had all different type of activities for us. Because some children just don't want to go to the school setting, but something away, but still in the community.
Close by to the home, you know, where they don't have to, where they don't have to depend on the parents all the time, because parent schedulers are crazy.
And the reason they don't have them is because there's not the funding is not there. But if the funding was there, I'd be interested.
I've been telling my agency forever, like, we need something preventative for the kids. Like, we used to have funding where we would work with the juvenile justice youth. We don't have, like, the grants for that no more, so unfortunately we don't. We would always, like, I'd spend a lot of time in the courts with them and all these forced programs, and it's just like, what are we doing for preventative?
Right.
So before we get
and
here.
things that are not stigma associated.
It's part of our
you know,
strategic plan. It works. If we want to join the committee, there is funding.
And they also need stuff that it's going to engage them as well, because a lot of the programs are just like basic stuff and the kids will do it, but then after a while it's redundant and it becomes boring. So they need something that
They
is
need to
gonna
be a way to be
interest them.
creative and fun and educational.
The input of the youth to determine what the program.
I apologize to everyone for the disjointed nature of this, but we're going to pick back up. They're asking me to hold on first. I'm clear on WebEx. Does that mean I don't need the phone? Okay, you know, I'm going to keep you connected, and I'm just going to put you on mute, just in case. Is that okay? Okay, thanks. All right. Okay, I'm going to start again with this case just from the beginning, from the fact pattern, just to just refresh our memories on this one. So this is a burglary case. We have two young people, a 13 and 15-year-old, who broke into a UPS store. And were stealing packages twice in 1 week. They were looking at packages that looked like shoes to them, sneakers. And
on the table, that's what I'm thinking. If the speaker's on the table, then you need to get closer.
Yeah. You want me
You
to
can
get
try
close?
to stand still. Stand still like a statue.
That's what I do.
Pick that one up.
Shuffle your
Pick that one
papers.
up like you had before.
Just
It'll work for you.
Oh, that one does not work.
I don't know. Try it.
Try this one.
This one's all beat up.
All right. Does this one work? If I hold this, does this work? Can you all hear me?
This.
You can hear this? Okay, this is my new mic. All right. So we've got this burglary that's been happening. We talked to the victim, who's the store owner. He literally says, I want my pound of flesh. I want these kids punished. That's our starting point with the victim, because for him, it's caused a lot of inconvenience. He's had to apologize and confront his customers who lost their packages. He has had to comfort his staff members who now are kind of fearful, because twice in 1 week, people have gone in there and broken through the gate that is separating people from their packages. And so we talk to the 13-year-old and we do an assessment with them. We find out, because the 13-year-old has some significant IDD issues, so developmental disability issues, he's not really a good candidate for participating in a conference. But he does write an apology letter. He feels badly about what's happened, and we coach him through that process. The 15-year-old also feels really badly about what's happened, and he agrees to go to the conference. So at the conference, we have the 15-year-old, we have their parent, we have a younger sibling, we have the business owner, and we end up having an employee from the business. We don't have someone who lost their package, just we weren't able to get that person or those people to participate. They have their conference. And in the end, through having a chance to talk with each other and prepare, a few things emerge. One, we learned that the shopkeeper grew up just a few blocks away from where the 15-year-old's family lives. So they have an immediate personal connection around that neighborhood and the space of growing up there. We get an apology from the 15-year-old. We get the 15-year-old agrees to pay for the replacement of the barricade that was damaged. They agree to pay the replacement value of the packages, all through a job that they're going to have to find. And they also agree to do more community service. So we get this outcome on this case where we literally repair the physical harm that's been done, and we relationally repair the harm done to the business owner and the employees through the apology and that added connection of that neighborhood where they were from. And people walked away feeling a really powerful experience from it. When we have a chance to be in dialogue with each other and address these things, a lot of creative solutions can come to bear. So those are just a couple examples of the cases. And in the interest of time, since I know we've had some delays, I'm just going to get us to the data real quick. This is for data October 21 to October 22. October 22 was the last month of services under this.
if you're wondering how did our cases distribute by borough, you see the chart on the left with the different percentage of cases by borough. This is 195 cases that received some sort of mediation, conflict coaching, or conference service. There are many other cases we touched at intake. We had restorative chats with people. We did those restorative circles with people at the beginning. Those cases are not counted in the 195.
Dan?
Yeah.
This breakup doesn't surprise me of the 195 cases, but do you have a sense of whether any of the boroughs had better uptake than the others?
For sure. And it was very, and this is something we're trying to address in this new system, it was very much based on the people. Okay, and so if I would have ran this donut for you back the year before, Queens would have by far been our biggest borough because we just had amazing synergy, and then we had people leave probation, and we had key people leave the CDRC there. And so it's interesting how it's just so dependent on relationship. And I should have put it in a timeline because I think it was a real accomplishment, there was a real push because of the, at the time, the change in administration in the mayor's office to put some of this into policies and procedures. And so actually CRI has been written into policies and procedures in Department of Probation right before the change of administration. But there is still, even if it's in there, it's a different thing for people to buy in and actually enact it. So we're really happy that our future version of this includes people back on site as the initial model envisioned, side by side with their probation colleagues and family court intake staff.
I have a question about the neighboring donut. Were there any charges that were ineligible for this program?
Well, initially everything but assault and burglary. It was that focused from the start. And as you see, there has been this kind of creep to want to include more. And so right now, obviously it's only things that have been moved towards adjustment. So we're not doing, you'll have to forgive me with my terminology, was it the adolescent offender type of cases, those we are, the AOs we aren't handling, the very, very serious gun charge types of cases right now we are not handling. But there is a desire, and you already see it here, that there are some non-person-on-person things in here as well already. So that's something that probation has on their mind. Thanks, Judge. Other questions, and also inviting folks in New York City. Okay, so what are the outcomes? Because of the changing nature of the program and the experimentation, it was very hard to run like a real legit research agenda. But when we looked at the cases in the last year that were touched through this program, we've got a 3% rearrest rate. We have a 91% successful adjustment rate. So that tells us we're on the right track and that we're getting good results when people are interacting with these services. But there's a lot more work to do to be able to study this by charge, by demographics, by all sorts of factors, including the service provided. And also we're in the world of small sample size right now, so it's also hard to just draw any significant conclusions. Questions on just the overview of the types of situations and where the cases were coming from? So my last piece before I leave you all is to talk about where are we going from here. I talked about the single provider model. The picture here, which is kind of a weird picture as I look at it, that's our RFP that went out. We've gotten proposals, and we're in the process of selecting a provider. We believe we'll have a provider selected this week, and we believe we're going to contract April 1, and that services will be back online shortly thereafter. It'll be one of the programs that we've worked with before who's knowledgeable of this, and we believe we'll also be able to hire from some of the folks who are already involved so that there won't be too much ramp-up time. The city wants to maintain its focus on restorative conferences and to make that the first goal of the interaction with young people, and only offer the other services if conference can't come together because of the victim's interest or the lack of interest from the family. We want to continue to expand the charges, and there's even some interest in going into the older and adult population, 18 to 24. That's the age groups. And then continue training for probation staff. And Matthew Lynch, who is our amazing partner at New York City Probation, he has a research background, and we are already engaging with university partners, multidisciplinary law schools, as well as social work schools to create a research agenda for this, so that next time I'm presenting about this a few years from now, we'll be able to really give you something much more satisfying around the outcomes and the research. So that's what I had in mind. I want to continue just to say thank you so much. Without the JJAG support, we wouldn't have gotten off the ground. And while it was a bit of a bumpy ride with a lot of unexpected turns, I think we've learned a lot. And we've got the foundation and the support from probation to continue this work. So thank you so much, and thank you for the time.
Just a comment on that. You know, it's particularly impressive in view of the change that New York City Department of Probation is going through. They've had an awful time to retain qualified staff. Salary is a real issue for them. In the last 3 years, 376 of 800 staff have departed the department. 40% of the staff. So it's a real challenge for the department there. They have some qualified people there, very committed people. We're all very sorry to see Ana Bermudez resign and move on. She was wonderful, but Janine Gray, the deputy in charge of the juvenile division, is very qualified, very committed. You know, I brought this to the attention of the deputy mayor, Phil Banks, when I met with him several weeks ago about the importance in trying to stabilize that department there, and he said he and the mayor had spoken about it. So staffing is clearly a challenge down in the New York City Department of Probation, and yet they carry on.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for giving that context, Bob, because I think that is part of what we experienced. Sometimes you would finally break through, you'd have that great relationship, and whether it was on our side or their side, someone would leave, and then you were kind of like starting over. And you think things like developing policies are the answer to make these things more durable, but there is this element that it's like sometimes just one person away from working or not working. You know, and so that's part of what we for sure experienced.
In fairness, I think it's representative of just trying to get people into public service these days with the challenges.
Yeah. Well, and the acting commissioner, Michael Forte, he was there from day one with Commissioner Bermudez, since he has so much fiscal and contracting experience. So Michael's also very much committed to this program. So in this interim period, we still have great support from the leadership there. Great. Any other questions or comments?
Is this model something that you're looking, or that anyone's looking to do outside of the city, like in the rest of the city?
There is a version that Judge Friedman could talk about in Erie County in Buffalo that was kind of like starting right around the same time as this, or the conversations around it at least. And there are elements of things like the restorative conferences that are part of it, and the mediation and the conflict coaching. So they're related. It's the threaded aspect of the CDRC and the probation department that is kind of one of the differentiating factors. And also the role of family court is quite a bit different in those cases than here. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, or if there's time.
There's time for that today, but I'm certainly happy to have a conversation about it. Dan, do you have any idea what it would cost to scale this up?
Well, we're even wondering what the cost is to scale it up in New York City. You know, as we looked at the proposals, like, you know, we increased our contribution, probation increased their contribution. we thought there's some economies of scale to go to one provider, but as we see the budget come back, we understand there's going to be a lid on even what we can offer for this. It's something I'd want to study and get back to you about, Nina, because we know what we have to offer right now is not quite enough. And if we're talking about scaling elsewhere, community to community can be really different. So I'd be happy to study that with you.
And I think as you're looking at that, really taking a look at what's the cost avoidance,
the savings,
forget to do that, and so really what are we saving by not detaining kids, by not having additional crimes, by really successful? That would be really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. Okay, I appreciate the time. I'll let you get on with your other business, and thank you again for all the support.
Thank you. Nice presentation.
Thank you so much, Dan, for your uber flexibility in dealing with our tech stuff. We're gonna continue forward with our agenda. We'll probably shorten some pieces so that we can make sure that we allot the, especially we give enough time to talk about the strategic plan, which is a big piece that we want to sort of talk through. With the attention of sort of shortening our time, in terms of our next agenda item regarding discipline reform, and I'll just say this for now, and we'll save it for we can have more time at our next meeting. The State Ed Department released a report regarding recommendations for improvements around discipline reform, and I had an opportunity to engage State Ed around the recommendations, which are around improvements regarding the training and preparation of educators in schools, and that includes teachers, administrators, counselors, aides, and they're looking at regulatory improvements to really be more preventative in the manner in which discipline is being used within this context of schools, and other sort of types of changes in practice. For example, removing exclusionary discipline for children at a much younger age. For example, I know in California and other states, they have moved to remove exclusionary discipline except for extreme situations for kids under the grade of second grade, right? That it's not an option to exclude kids. And so these are all sets of recommendations that have been put forth in the State Ed Department in conversation with Regent Young, who is also on the JAG. We discussed the possibility of, what could be some synergy that can exist between JAG and our priorities, particularly given our strategic plan and the set of recommendations that State Ed is looking at moving forward across the state. It is not, I'll say this because I attended the Regents meeting in February. It is a robust set of recommendations that for the education leaders in school districts is not there's more work to be done to get everybody on board. So it is, but we want to kind of create sort of an opportunity for the JAG and State Ed Department to look at ways in which we can have synergy. So all that to say, we're going to look at having some type of, presentation at our next JAG meeting where we can hear about the recommendations and consider where could be points of synergy. So any questions, thoughts around this discipline piece? We will be sharing the report. We'll send that out in terms of the recommendations that exist in the report, as well as I think there's a PowerPoint that kind of gives a summary. All right. Any questions or comments? Let's go to the regional youth justice teams.
Sure. And just to be brief, I know that the JAG in 2013 with the regional youth justice teams have been funding them for the last few years, and the funding ended in September 30th of 2022 this year for the regional youth justice teams. And really, there's been a lot of great things that they've done, with reducing racial and ethnic disparities, implicit bias, trauma, positive youth development, mentoring, youth with problematic sexual behaviors initiatives, results-based accounting. But with all the successes, there's also been, some challenges, and really thinking about like what those challenges have been. We worked with the YJI to conduct a survey, and I think we sent out the survey to all the JAG members, and you guys, were able to see some of the challenges: inconsistent attendance, smaller counties with regions kind of feeling overlooked, the time, the duration. Of course, COVID has always been was a challenge for everybody. Information overload, but also additionally there were some challenges with actually being able to administer the grants, because the way that the grants had to be administered, it was a heavy burden on the grantees, which are usually the counties, to be able to get the grants out to where they wanted to. So, we're really thinking about what makes sense as far as the structure, for the regional youth justice teams, and maybe not even the regional youth justice teams. What we really have been thinking about is really, there's been an investment by the JAG to kind of start this rural communities of practice initiative, and really thinking about maybe looking at rural and then urban communities of practice, because we know that there's just similarity between rural communities, that they have their issues, and same with urban communities, and really kind of figuring out how that statewide collaborative might looking at rural and urban communities. So we're still kind of in the think tank of thinking what that might look like, but we wanted to, kind of bring it to you guys to let you guys know that, regional youth justice teams, the funding were over, and then we wanted to really think about like what restructuring that might look like, where we can really get, especially with, the JAG having some money, and really, we're talking about RFPs and getting it to the communities and getting it to the right people, differently than what we've done in the past. I'm not sure if there's any questions on that, but just really, that was a kind of quick overview of what we're looking at.
All right.
I turn it back to you, Eddie.
That sounds like you were pretty effective with sharing.
Can I, I'm trying to figure this, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I don't know if it's a question or asked. I don't remember, and this might be on me, what were the successes? You mentioned things, they're so overall, but because there's no numbers in it, I don't know how successful it was.
Right.
So numbers are really, when we're talking about success, I do need to see the numbers.
Okay.
So if we can see that would be great. And then I think it would be, going back to an official person, if you can write down like how would this urban and rural communities of practice would look like, would be nice, so we can start to think of it.
No, definitely. We can definitely do that.
Okay, great.
Those are. I mean, the numbers are going to be a little longer to get.
No worries, but I just.
But the urban and rural, kind of what we're looking at, I mean, we're still in the thought process and the think tank about that. But yeah, when we kind of get that scoped out a little more, we can definitely get that out.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments? All right. So our next agenda item, the firearm data follow-up.
We have Emily over in Albany who is going to speak about that.
No, it's not really working. Yeah. Where the other one?
I see that one. Yeah. I'm trying to pull it. That's his part. Yeah, that's all right. Do you want to sit here? Here. Thanks. All right, just confirming everyone can hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. So in your packet, there's a couple tables in the folder. The first one is showing adolescent offender firearm use part arraignment. So if everyone can just pull that out. And so we're doing a little follow-up to the presentation that we did in December, where we shared the data related to the 16 and 17-year-olds and raised the age. And out of that presentation came a few questions about the 16 and 17-year-old firearm cases that we shared at the end of the presentation. So, and so those questions specifically were about the specific types of firearm charges we were seeing
with the 16 and 17-year-olds, and then if there were differences in how those cases are handled in the youth part of the criminal court, depending on what was charged. So just a quick refresher about what we went over during that meeting with regard to the firearm crime and the 16 and 17-year-olds specifically. We have seen an increase in the firearm arrests for all age groups in recent years, so including the 16 and 17-year-olds, but certainly not limited to the 16 and 17-year-olds. And just really important context for this group to remember is that the 16 and 17-year-olds in the grand scheme of firearm crime and firearm arrests, they make up a relatively small proportion of the firearm arrests. It was about 8% in 2021. So certainly not the driver of the increase in arrests that we were seeing. So just to go over a couple of the questions that we had, this first table here, it shows the 16 and 17-year-old firearm cases that were disposed in youth part, so those cases that were handled in youth part since 2019. And so we can see, looking at this table, in 2020 and 2021, we do see an increase statewide of about 200 cases, firearm cases disposed. This is during full implementation of Raise the Age. All the kids in 2020 and 2021 are now, their cases are being held in youth part. And so we do see that increase, about a 42% increase statewide. And then so far in 2022 through the third quarter, we saw 576. When the data are all complete in 2022, we probably can expect to see a smaller increase in 2022 than what we saw between 2021 and 2020. But maybe we are starting to see the cases plateau some. So the main takeaway from this table here, and we're looking at the specific charges down the left-hand side of the table, is that 60%, almost 60% of these firearm cases that we're seeing are the PL 265-03. It's criminal possession of a weapon second. That is a C felony. And we did look at the specific subsection of those cases, of that 60% of cases, and they are mostly, almost all of them, possession of a loaded firearm. There's a few other subsections in there, but that is mostly what's being charged, about 60% possession of a loaded firearm. So then it's followed by about a quarter of the cases robbery related, and we did look at those specific crimes as well, and those are mostly the robbery first, where the individual displays a firearm. And then there's a much smaller proportion of cases, of serious cases, of homicide or assault. Most of these cases there's an underlying firearm charge. So and so when we talk about, what kind of cases we're seeing, there's very, very few other firearm crimes, PL 265 crimes. They are just really mostly this criminal possession of a weapon second. And then proportionally, the very serious homicide, assault-related cases are the smaller proportion, and then robbery, which is the B felony, which is a serious robbery, serious crime, displaying a firearm. That's about a quarter of the cases that we've seen over the last 3.25 years. So I'll stop there and just see if anyone has any questions about the specific charges that are being handled in youth part before we move on to what's happening to those cases in youth part. Any questions? All right, so if we move on to the next table, so here we're showing outcomes of these firearm crimes in youth part, and we did just focus on the criminal possession of a weapon and the robbery charges specifically, because those are really the bulk of the charges that we're seeing. Over 85%, close to 85% of them are these two crime types.
So just a little bit of a refresher of what we showed during the presentation is that specifically with these firearm crimes, what we have seen in the last kind of couple of years is a decrease in the number of cases that are being removed to family court or probation intake, and at the same time, an increase in the number of cases that are getting the conviction or the YO adjudication in the youth part of the criminal court. So looking at that top table, or at the top row here, you can see in 2019 and 2020, you have about 84% of the total firearm cases are getting removed. In 2021, that goes down to 74%. So far in 2022, that's at 73%. And at the same time, and this is data that we showed in January, we're seeing an increase in the convictions and adjudication. So in 2019 and 2020, it's between 8 and 10%, and then that goes up to 19% getting the conviction or adjudication in 2021, up to 23% so far in 2022. And then, sorry, did you have a question, Nina?
No, I just want to say that that might be a reflection of case processing, though. Remember that for the AOs, and we're just seeing, we have kids who've been in detention for 4 years, right? And 3 years and 2 years. We have more kids in longer than I've ever seen before. So it doesn't that increase doesn't necessarily mean that those cases were from that year. Some of those cases are lingering possibly from even 2019.
So, yeah, so these are
just for other folks who may not be in the weeds like some of us are, unfortunately.
Yeah, so in these cases are cases disposed within that year, and they are all in youth part, so they're all considered AO. So they wouldn't include any of like the phase-in kids that weren't AOs yet, but we're kind of getting.
But we don't have any of those in detention. Anyway. So I'm just saying that we have kids still whose cases who have been in detention since 2020. So their cases have not been resolved yet. So some of this is a reflection of all the cases being put on pause for the entire year from in 2020 and 2021 when there were no trials going forward. And so the cases are being disposed of now in a more regular manner than they were even in 2021. So that may be an artifact of it going up. It doesn't mean that the conviction rates are getting higher. It just means the cases are moving are getting disposed of finally.
Yeah,
and for folks, for context.
Yeah, and we can definitely kind of look into more, I would say. So if we look at the 265, you'll see that they have a little bit of a higher removal rate than the robbery. You know, we're looking in the 80s, and that removal rate has gone down. It was between 85 and 89% in 2019 and 2020. It goes down to the low 80s in 2021, and then so far in 2022. And then we are seeing just proportionally of the cases that are getting disposed, a higher proportion of those cases are there's a conviction. So with the robbery, we're seeing kind of a more dramatic decrease in the cases being removed. It was 82% in 2019 and 2020, and then that goes down quite a bit, 76% in 2021, down to 67% so far in 2022. So again, that's a B felony. Most of those are B felonies, a serious crime. And so, and I've showing this data to other people in DCJS. I know I've heard a few comments just about the system starting to kind of react to the firearm crime, firearm violence, somewhat harsher outcomes for these firearm crimes.
I have another anecdotal opinion about some of these numbers that I'd like to share. One of the things that we're seeing, because now Raise the Age has been in effect for several years, is repeat offenders. And so whereas the first time we might remove to family court, maybe the second, third, fourth, or fifth time, we might say, you know, there's extraordinary circumstances, or, you know, it's already been shown that the services have not met the needs of the youth, and so we're not going to remove, or they've burned their YO. So the adjudication numbers change too. So it might be interesting to look at that issue if we're really analyzing these numbers, is to see how many of these youth are new youth in the system, and how are they being treated maybe differently from repeat offenders.
Yeah, that certainly is an interesting question, and it's something that our office is working on. The data are very complicated, and because of the fact that when a youth is arraigned in youth part, they get removed, their case gets sealed, and then if they don't get a JD finding in family court, that case gets totally expunged out of the system. However, you know, we are trying to do a very complicated kind of demographic matching process to try to identify kind of what you're getting at, recidivism numbers.
Thank you. The other thing with the 265 numbers is, at least in Erie County, we have a lot of situations where multiple people are arrested because there was a gun in a car. And so then the issue becomes, is there any proof that it's this specific individual's gun? And often the answer is no. And so that's part of this complicating factor with that charge.
So they could all be charged with that possession of a loaded firearm, even if it was just one person's. And
yeah, because there's a whole vehicular statute that says they will all be charged. But then if there's no DNA evidence of a specific individual or something like that, those cases get removed because of lack of proof. That's part of this process.
That's very interesting.
Juicy fruits, carefully.
So did anyone else have any other questions or comments about this? I think just to reiterate that the main takeaways here is that most of these charges are this criminal possession of a weapon and the robbery. It's 85% of the firearm charges that we're seeing. So when we talk about firearm crime and 16 and 17-year-olds, we talk about trends, we talk about what's driving decisions. These are the firearm crimes that the youth parts are handling.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Oh,
I think Nina has
Yeah, this makes me really particularly judge with what you just said about, sort of the broad ways that the laws are applied, and that, we were just talking about this yesterday at a different meeting. The rhetoric, and I know we've talked about this here before, the rhetoric that we are seeing in the paper is just getting hotter and hotter, and people are declaring raise the age a failure, as if New York State was taking some magical leap into the unknown with treating 16, 17-year-olds like 16, 17-year-olds instead of like adults, and we know that we were last, except for North Carolina, thank you very much. We had talked about putting out a statement as the JJAG to sort of either as a myth-busting, like what's true, what's not true. I mean, some of these numbers are disturbing, right? Even though they're low, to see the jump of 2 homicide firearm-related charges to 33 in 3/4 of a year, that's alarming, but it doesn't say this policy is a failure. And we are a very important group of people in the state, and where is our ability to put out a statement to be on the record to correct what is just total misinformation, purposeful or not, right? Many people just don't understand what the law can and cannot do, but there just aren't enough voices with the counter argument right now. I know, Judge Mendelson, you had a similar sort of conversation recently, right? People also declared close to home a failure in the first year because kids were running away in the first year. So this is to me feels dangerous. that we're really going to start to see people push policy agendas that are very retro, revanchist. People know that whatever that word is. But you know, it's all of the reforms that we spent years making. I'm seeing a lot of that thinking and language has left. Many courtrooms, many of the reports that I get to read around kids, we're seeing lots of arguments that these are bad kids. So I don't know what other people are seeing and hearing in their practice, but I'm alarmed. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I agree, and I'm concerned, and judges in particular have very strict limits about what we can say. So we rely on community to speak truth from on the ground of what we are experiencing. So I would strongly support an entity like this giving balance to the narrative. I already sent an email to my juvenile justice team with the data and the numbers and the way it was presented. I love the quote that these young people are not the drivers of crime, the way the media reports and the social narrative says they are. And there's nobody saying it's not true. Nobody is saying it's not true, except us in meeting spaces like this. The other thing that comes to mind, and I know there are confidentiality endeavors in or limits in the family courts, but a lot of these young people with a possession case they're all in family court. A lot of these young people, because the way the law is written, and there's a movement to change the law so they won't be in family court. But right now, these young people, a lot of the young people with gun possession end up being removed to the family court. And what is our data about that? The narrative is that once you go to family court, it's a slap on the wrist and nothing happens, which makes me chuckle internally, because if those who know that, first of all, family court does have protective detention. Family court can remand young people if there was a fear they will reoffend. The adult court can't do that. It's only flight risk, right? And so it's the narrative that nothing happens in family court to these young people is, again, a lie. And that family courts just slap young people and say, please stop using guns. And we know that that's not true. So there are a lot of stories that aren't being told about the truth, and we in the courts can't tell those stories.
You know, if I may, to add on the education side. So on the education side, what's happening is that school educators are struggling. A narrative has been growing is these kids are coming in with problems. We don't know what to do with them. Let's send them somewhere, right? So there's also a nature of reacting to sort of the struggles that kids are contending with, balanced with the system itself not being nimble enough to know how to provide the supports. And as well as we all know, schools aren't always the best in knowing how to partner with other agencies that have expertise around providing those supports. And also I have to acknowledge also the availability of being able to, you know, particularly the resources to be able to partner is not always there.
Right.
That schools are finding their, they're wanting to hold on to whatever tools are available to them, like exclusionary discipline, as a means to be able to address some of the issues that they're saying, you know, educators are saying, like, I've never seen this before. Who are these kids, right? And so I think in some ways there's how all of these systems that are dealing with the same population may also sort of be experiencing, the kids themselves are experiencing what system is ready for helping me deal with my struggles.
So I have a question. I know that there's been a push for some time now with providing mental health services in schools. Mm-hmm. How is that working? Are they really connecting, even though the therapists or, the social workers are in the schools? It's supposed to help augment the challenges that the schools are experiencing, but how are they utilizing those services?
Right. Right, exactly. So so there's a set of dollars that are obviously available related to COVID that a lot of school districts got, and those set of dollars are sunsetting, right? So a lot of the dollars were pushed into hiring behavioralists, right? So you have these folks who have a particular expertise, and so what's happening in schools is that
Do I hang up? Do I not just call?
is that you have these experts, these behavioralists are coming in and are being basically told, here, take these kids, handle them. And there's no provisions that are being made, build the capacity of the other adults to do preventive work, right? What are the ways in which, as a classroom educator, I can learn how to de-escalate? How do I manage so that I'm not also a trigger and exacerbating the sort of the struggles that kids are having, right? And so that's not what's happening. It's you're an expert? Oh, great. I got 15 kids for you, right? And over time, what's happening is that those behavioralists, and because of some of the districts I work with, what they're saying is they're overloaded. They're coming in, hoping to make the system stronger via the adults, but they're realizing like they're being taxed with, here are all the kids for you, And that's in some ways, and I know that there's been provisions around developing school-based mental health clinics, right? But those are, that's not widespread. So in some ways, it's kind of getting back to the point that was raised regarding, what may be the opportunities for us to, and I know we have sort of visited this point before, which is what could be the avenues that we could take to make, to be clear around how do we paint the picture of our youth so that it's not a pathology about the youth, right? And also encouraging the need for greater availability of resources to do both preventive and intervening work with our youth.
I think that I hear what you're saying, and I agree. But how can you do that when it's no longer like school safety, but really police in the schools now?
Yeah.
So the mindset is different from the perspective of being a police officer providing security in the school, as opposed to back in my day, when, school security was school security, right. And it was more of, for lack of a better term, more empathetic, as opposed to punitive.
Yeah.
Because we've seen pictures over the years with little 5-year-olds with their hands behind their back, with the tie on their hands, taking them off to the precinct.
Oh, that still happens.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that how does it work with pathologizing?
Yeah.
Because no matter how much we want to deny it, there are certain groups that are perceived as being a certain way no matter what you do. Right? And so automatically, depending on who's working with the children, this is how they're going to be viewed. And even though they might be 4 years old, they look like a 20-year-old to that individual. And that's how they're treated.
Yeah.
And so the same people that's supposed to be there to protect and make sure people are safe are the ones doing harm in many cases. We had a situation on Staten Island where the police officers who's supposed to be out there after school was beating up a child. It was all through YouTube.
Oh, I seen that. It was a girl.
Yeah, beating her up, and he was just going at it.
She was fighting somebody else, and they were trying to break it up. And instead of him de-escalating it, he started beating her.
So how do we change the perspective and the lens of the people who are supposed to be protected to do no harm? We've talked about, there's been trainings I think I attended through JJAG, that, they had trainings that they were doing for police officers and working together in schools to help them better understand the children that they were working with and not be so aggressive with them. I'm not even going to say assertive because it's aggressive with the children. And then we have youth mental health first aid that people were being trained in. But it seems like the training comes and the training goes, and there's no change in mindset or no change in behavior.
Yeah.
But how much of that is attributed to really not being punitive to those who are inflicting the harm? You know, the children are getting the consequences, but I don't see the adults who are conducting certain behaviors that if it was a parent would be arrested for abuse.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're bringing up something that's actually nicely tied with our next topic, which is around our strategic plan, right? Because we have some of these are some of the themes that we put into our strategic plan for us to have greater attention. And I think that this is a moment and I'm glad we're raising this in relation to this discussion around firearm sort of patterns that are going on the last several years. I think, and also connecting it to Judge Mendelson's report that she highlighted, because I was quickly glancing at it, and these are some of the elements that are in there as well. And the same thing is living in the discipline recommendations at state ed.
And accountability.
And the accountability that ties to it.
And transparency. Schools need to have records of how many interactions their school safety has had with the children. Maybe that would help.
Right. Yeah.
You know, depending on track record, and then coming up with plan of action of how to correct it, a corrective action plan.
Yeah.
And it also goes back to the accountability portion, because we can't have them in the schools and they're there to protect the kids, and then when something happens, they're escalating the situation and not de-escalating it, but then they're not being held accountable for excessive use of force or whatever the case may be. Right. They just come to work the next day, maybe file up a report with the principal, tell them what happened, and keeping it pushing.
And then the other side of it is, they may be afraid to say something for retribution from that officer or whomever has been inflicting the harm.
Right.
So there's a number of moving parts with that.
It's also a little bit of stigma behind it as well, because in Black and brown communities, we're told or brought up like not to trust the police or talk to the police and stuff. So now if they're in the school, they still have that mindset. So if something is happening,
we may not have been told it, but we've learned it.
Right.
Because the media is always showing stuff.
Right.
So there might have been a time when you're like, okay, be careful with the police. But there was a time when the police was your neighbor in your community.
Right.
So a lot of the imagery we're seeing now, I think, plays an important role in the perception. Because parents are scared their children are not going to come home. The children are scared that they're not going to come home. And so when everybody's afraid, fear creates behaviors that wouldn't ordinarily take place.
Right.
Because everybody's in survival mode.
Right, exactly.
I agree with everything that you guys are saying. This is Judge Friedman speaking. I wanted to share with you a little tiny part of a restorative justice project that we have going in Erie County that I would love funding to expand, and it goes to this very issue. One of the programs that we have in our restorative justice program is a 3-part program, and one of the stages of that program is a restorative circle that involves both the youth and law enforcement. And as part of that, there is role playing where the youth play the roles of the officers and the officers play the role of the youth. And I wish we could do this on a broader basis, because a lot of understanding and relationship building is happening on a very micro scale. And it goes to exactly what you're talking about. I mean, if we could do things like that with the resource officers in the schools and with other community police officers and do it on a broader scale, it really might heal some of these relationship issues.
Yeah, it's about getting to the gatekeepers. And schools are always, I think, gatekeepers for so many different things, because that's where the children are.
Right.
I'll try not to say nothing else.
This is Diana in Albany. I had shared before, I think, with a couple people individually, but there's a evidence-based resource called the Off-Ramp Project. I don't know if anyone's heard of this. It's called the Off-Ramp Project, and it's for K-12 schools, and it's about developing crisis response teams. It came out of research, longitudinal research on violence in schools, and it has lots of follow-up studies with efficacy, and there are all these free resources. And I know I had asked that the funding group look at this, and I know it's free in the sense that the resources are free. They have de-escalation models, intervention models, how to set up a crisis team, but the schools themselves might not have the people to implement this. So I would love for people to take a look at this and see if it's something that we might want to create some funding around. Again, it's called the Off-Ramp Project. It's worth looking at.
That was going to be my point too, because I know, for example, in Mount Vernon, they don't have the police officers in the school because they can't afford to pay them to have them there. So they just have regular security guards, and the security guards don't really do what they're supposed to do. But then if an incident happens, the cops are being called to come to the school to kind of de-escalate it. So it's like we don't have the funding to have them there, but then if something happens, we're calling them to say, hey, can you come and check this out, or it's a fight or something like that. So it's like there's no real connection there. There's no funding there. It's just up in arms. And it's to the point where now, too, I saw the other morning, they don't even have enough school crossing guards for the morning. So now the cops have to stand outside and walk the kids across the street, hold up the signs and stuff, because they don't have enough money for that.
But those are city entities. So how can the city justify spending extra money?
Right.
When they could be saving money with just, sometimes bureaucracy and the thinking that goes on makes you wonder who came up with some of these ideas.
And then we don't have people working together like they should. That's when situations
because
like
they're
that
working in
happen.
silos. No communication or lack of communication.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, I did that.
I was going to suggest that perhaps we talk about this in the context of our strategic plan, because I think these layers that we're offering up are areas that that I know were part of our initial sort of outlining of the strategic plan, and to revisit this with this continued attention, with this question of, well, how do we change the narrative that's out there, but also, are there still areas in which we can create more pockets of hope of changing the ways in which our institutions work? I think is Trista?
Yep.
Sharing this out?
Yep.
If we can. Trista, we can't see. The camera's off, but we're going to trust that you all are there.
We can hear, but we can't see. It's frozen.
All right, as long as you can hear, that's the good thing.
So, Trista, could you walk us through the grid that outlines our priority areas of our current strategic plan?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Yeah. In your packet, there should be a printout that has like a grid on it. It should look familiar to most of you. The program team had put this together a while back and looking at your strategic plan, as well as the survey that was sent out to the JAG members via the YJI to talk about sort of priority areas and ranking. And so with the program team, we sat down and looked at what we pulled out, what we thought were the themes that were in your plan, as well as sort of the priority areas. The top part is sort of the thematic areas that we felt ran through your entire strategic plan. That sort of second level of boxes, or tier of boxes, I'll say, was the programmatic pieces or program areas of target that we felt were in your strategic plan, as well as, where you see the year one, years 2 and 3. Those are based on the priority ranking you all gave in that survey from the YJI. And so then in this iteration, what we've done is we've pulled out and highlighted the OIJ programming areas. So in OIJ, the team focuses on programming for the JAG, and then also has other federal and state funding that we also program within the Office of Youth Justice. So these are the things that OIJ either is currently working on or has been working on in your current 3-year plan period that are funded by funding streams, but that programmatically are in line with the areas you all wanted to focus on. And then the bottom set of boxes, that last set of boxes, are the JAG funded priority areas, so the things that you funded within this current 3-year plan, or closely related to this current 3-year plan, have either funded or supported in some way as it relates to programming in your 4 buckets. So I believe that the ask that we had was to just give you all an update of sort of where, so you all could see what you have approved and funded within those buckets. to date, and to give you like a little idea of where you are in terms of progress related to programming under your current 3-year plan. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about?
Just for,
Okay.
hi, Trisha.
Hi.
Oh.
Hi.
This is Eddie's.
Hi, Eddie.
Sorry, sorry. This is just a clarifying question. Good. Thank you. Thank you for that overview. And thank you for putting this together as a visual for us to kind of just get all on one page, all the stuff that we put together in sort of that 10-page strategic plan that we had. I want to, I see that there is some of the JAG-funded programming is existing in several themed areas. And I just want to make sure that, that I understand that it's not, that it may have, we funded it, but it also helps to meet 2 different sort of themes or priorities that we had outlined, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Others have questions, reactions to this grid in terms of, I know this, it's our first time kind of reacting to it. If we want to ask any clarifying questions while we ground ourselves to what we're seeing here.
I have a question. Is girls justice the, I guess, theme or topic, or is that like the name of a program? Like, what is that about?
Yeah, so when we talk about equity, we're talking about equity in the context of racial and ethnic equity, gender, girls and gender-based equity, as well as we talk about geographical equity when we sort of thematically put things in place. And so girls' justice is really programming that is centered around gender-based equity and specific programming for girls. At one point, the JAG, in terms of funding, there was an initiative where we worked with the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform. Shalane worked with the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform to bring in a girls-centered practice certificate in partnership with the Dolores Barr Weaver Institute in Florida. And we had some local level teams as well as the state level teams who were a part of that. And if you look in your JAG annual report, I believe there was also an update on that too in more detail. If you need more information, I'm looking at Shalane to tell me if I'm wrong. Okay, great.
The one question or reaction I have, in this, just from sort of where I sit in this work is under the column where we have alignment. One of the areas is around partnering with schools, and I know historically we've had funding allocated for what we used to actually in terms of a partnership with state ed department, and I think it was a previous strategic plan, and it's my wondering is around some of the set of JAG-funded programming, where, as I'm thinking about each one of these, how do we, whether or not we see sort of intentional partnerships with schools, or, and I don't know if this happens through, maybe this is something that's happening through the regional youth justice teams, where you have a cross set of agencies sitting at the table. But I'm still wondering sort of where are the opportunities for us to do intentional collaboration, whether it's with SCD or in relation with SCD that impacts schools. And I'm thinking, particularly as in looking at their discipline recommendations, where may be opportunities for us to collaborate with them, given their priority around reducing the habit of using exclusionary strategies to and promoting more preventive strategies, right? So, rather than emphasizing a great deal of funding around safety and security that looks a very particular way. Where are the investments around more preventive work?
So I've been thinking about this while you've been talking about this, because we see all the time kids getting taken out of school for, I mean, we specialize in problematic and illegal sexual behavior for that, but we see for other disciplinary issues. And it's interesting to me because a lot of times schools will make that decision, but then they put it on mental health professionals to make the decision for them to come back to school. But we weren't part of the decision to take them out of school, which most mental health professionals would say, let's not take them out of school, and let's figure out a way to safely serve them in school, because there's all these other ramifications for taking them out of school, you know, social impact, family impact, all kinds of things, and then they get really behind in school. So I was just thinking, you know, that tie between the silos, you know, so how do we work better together for mental health and keeping kids in school who are disciplinary problems.
And not just disciplinary as well, but like you mentioned, the mental health aspect of it all, because I work at a mental health clinic, so we have children there, and sometimes we'll have kids that'll be out of school for like a month. And then it's up to us there to be like, okay, this is what has to happen in order for them to go back to school. But nobody has even said anything as to the fact why they've been out for a month. Like after a week, you should be calling, checking in at least to see what's going on, but they're out of school for a month and it's no contact there. So where's that connection as well? And then now it's up to us to maybe write letters or keep the teachers or the principal or the board even up to date as to what's going on with them. And like you said, we weren't a part of the decision to take them out, but now we have to be the ones on top of everything to get them back in.
You know, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, and I guess we'd have to talk to SED about this, because Raise the Lower Age was just implemented, and thinking about the concern that, you know, what we don't want to see as a unintended consequence is that more kids end up with a disciplinary response instead of a law enforcement response. I wonder if there is if there's a space either for some training or some pilot work somewhere, like a proof of concept around how to address behavioral challenges in schools. We know also that when kids act out, it often just gets labeled behavioral, and then it gets thrown out. Then kids get written off anyway as being a problem, and sort of shunted into the youth justice system as soon as they can. And what we don't want to see is people waiting around till a kid turns 12 so they can then arrest them. But there might be a really interesting space here to work with SED on including the problematic sexual behaviors of younger kids, to really, really focus on ending the use of expulsion, isolation, also through the restorative practice. I know SED trained tons and tons of schools on restorative justice practice before COVID. I don't know what happened to any of that practice, or whether any of the people who were trained are still in any of the schools, since we had such a big flight. But that might be an interesting inflection point for us with SED.
That's a great question. You know, your point is also raising for me because in school districts there is a emphasis. Well, there's been a national push to ensure that there is more intentional and well implemented tiered supports for youth, and your idea makes me wonder, where is the opportunity, particularly in the sort of tertiary, third tier support area, that schools find themselves at the greatest loss of what to do? That are there opportunities in terms of where are the examples of that piloting around that area? Because the RJ work is mostly living in schools as a tier 2 strategy, and at times a well executed tier 2 in schools, because there's you know, schools are, you know, because of the challenges of resources and time, are good about just putting something in, like to say I did the thing, the degree to which there is a high level of fidelity, right? Whether or not there is the resources to support a wellness or progress monitoring around that implementation at tier 2 is of concern at the school level. But I'm wondering if there could be targeted piloting opportunity for sort of more that tertiary level of supports that kids need.
So one of the things we have in our county, which even across the country, this is pretty rare, but we have a multidisciplinary team that meets that's specific to problematic and illegal sexual behavior, but it's represented on it's chaired by myself and also our county attorney, but it's represented by every school district in the county. So there's a social worker usually from every school district, and that allows schools to bring cases of illegal and problematic sexual behavior that they become aware of to the committee for safety planning for the school to keep the kids in school. And most of the school districts will follow the recommendations from the committee. And also social services, the CAC, trying to think who else, all the mental health agencies that work with kids in the county, it's all represented, probation.
So how could we expand that from the population you work with to the population of mental health needs in general, the emotional, behavioral side, those who have other types of diagnoses, so that everybody that has a mental health need can get the same type of supports, for lack of a better word, or hands-on approach from different levels to ensure that what needs to happen for these young people is happening. Because a lot of young people end up in trouble that have mental health challenges.
Yeah.
They end up at the precinct and jail as opposed to an appropriate support network, whether it's a local mental health clinic or, inpatient if that's what's needed, or day treatment services. But how do we get those kind of eyes on the other children, you know what I mean, that have mental health needs?
I think it goes back to funding on all levels, though, not just that, because a lot of day programs, outpatient programs, even mental health clinics, they're so booked and short-staffed, so the kids or just even adults that need the help, they have to wait to get that help because they don't have anybody there that can see them automatically.
Okay. So the other issue for me is, when they started this lotto thing, they said the money was going to help the schools. Has any money been going to the schools? Because there's always that need. Parents are having to provide the supplies and resources for the schools, right? Parents that can't even afford to do it are required to provide the paper, provide the napkins, provide the snacks, provide this. And has anybody ever asked the question, well, what happened to the money that was promised when you initiated the lotto system? Right. That's a lot of money when you think about how much tax is taken out from people's winnings. If that's what they said they're going to do we have any watchdogs or watch groups that are monitoring to make sure that the powers that be that indicated what was going to happen with the money is actually happening with the money? Because the schools are in dire need. In every level you look at, the schools are still lacking. And schools, and the success of a child in a school is an indicator of what your prison system is going to look like. So to me, it's almost like having preventive measures. If you could give them what they need, as opposed to waiting to after the fact, so who is it benefiting by them not doing it besides the prison system? So we go back to the school to prison pipeline.
Right.
There's a feeder happening there.
Yeah. You're raising, I think part of what for us to think about is as we look at the institutions that our kids interact with, where's the prevention work, right? Where's the intervention work, right? And I'm thinking about schools. I'm also thinking about courts, right? Like, where's also the touch points of potential that could happen, right? In terms of courts also having an opportunity to play a role in intervention that is minimizing the potential of reoffending, right? And I'm, as I'm looking at sort of where we have prioritized our funding, I think we see some pockets of some of this, but I'm not sure we're seeing a lot, or in terms of our partnerships in education and in courts.
It's such a great
Albany,
need when it comes to children.
Any thoughts around or reactions from the Albany side? We know we can't see you all, but we think that you all are just sitting there, also just as vexed as us.
Yeah, we're working on we're trying to work on the video.
But we are vexed.
I mean, we're seeing an increase in the use of diversion in our county, which I think I wasn't sure about at first. But I'm seeing it be very helpful with especially some of the younger kids, but even some of the older kids, just giving them the opportunity to get into services that they didn't know or their families didn't know existed. And so we have a lot more kids going through diversion programs that end up being successful in outpatient treatment, and then go on and do, good things. So.
As you know, the earlier you get them, the better the outcomes,
Right.
projected outcomes.
Right, and for a long time, if they come through treatment through the court system, they see it as an arm of the court system. And this allows them an opportunity to kind of even view it a little differently. So.
But then there's still that court involvement.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And it goes back to the preventative measures that need to be put in place so they don't even have to get that far to say, okay, this is a court mandated treatment, or if you don't do this, you're going to be back here in like 3 months or something like that, because that's not really helping them. Because if they fall off, now they're going to have in their mind, oh my God, I'm going back to jail, or I'm going back to court, and whatever else comes from that. We need something in place to keep them focused or keep them somewhat on a straight and narrow path so that doesn't have to happen. It's always okay, well, they've been to jail, they can't go back, so let's put them in this program. They do it for maybe 6 months to a year. After that, they're done.
You know, what makes sense to me is if there was like some kind of discussion group with the youth that get arrested and ask them if they could have any kind of resources or services, what it would look like, and then take their input and create programming around that, as opposed to coming up with the program and say, here, come to this program, which you may not get buy-in from because it's not really what they're looking at. And the way we did services 5, 10, 15 years ago are not what the youth of today need. The needs are so different. Like I'm looking at this, girls' justice, but now we have non-binary children. How do we support children in those identifications?
And they're starting younger and younger.
I see them.
So it can't be a program for people age maybe 15 or 21. You have to start by like 8, 9 years old.
But you want to make sure that the group is age appropriate because you don't want younger children learning other things from other children. But just to get an idea from the youth that are coming through the systems of what do you need? What would help you or prevent you from getting to this point? Because they know.
Yeah.
They know.
And a lot of times, too, it's not really them that are doing what they're doing because they want to. It's more so starting from home with parents. They see their parents struggling. They see their siblings struggling, or grandma, whoever's taking care of them. So they're trying to figure out what they can do to contribute to the household.
Or fear.
Right.
Fear that somebody's going to beat them up out in the street, and they want to feel safe and protected. Because that's why a lot of the young people join gangs. Because they may have mental health conditions or something that makes them a little different than the other children or more unique, right? And so they want to go where they're accepted. So they want to feel safe. They don't want to be picked on anymore, right? We see the news media with children going in and just shooting up for those same reasons. But how do we work with young people to get them to come together and to work together and to use words and to respect each other through preventive interventions? On the ground, because, nothing against the JJAC, but we keep repeating the same type of services over and over and over again. And we've moved from this point at some level because, okay, these children are different. What does this group need? How successful, and I think Michelle was asking about numbers, how successful has it really been? Do we really need to go back and say, okay, let's be innovative here? We have to start blazing a new trail. Because these children today, tomorrow, and the next generation are going to be so different than what we're used to.
I feel like the trick is going to be to have more programming that's geared not just towards the youth, but towards the family.
Family.
Yeah. There's not enough stuff like for families.
Dynamics, family building, family bonding.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts in the mental health world because, and this is, I won't get on a soapbox, I promise.
I will.
But one of the issues in the mental health world is how many kids come through mental health clinics. They come through in droves. You know, I work in a mental health clinic. You work in mental health.
Yeah.
How many of those kids really have organic mental health issues? Or how much of this is trauma and environment and parenting and family issues?
Well, it goes back to
but then
trauma.
how often do we treat the family?
Let's go back to trauma. Because the parents have been traumatized, grandparents have been traumatized, and nobody's talking about it. And it's trickling down to what some of us call generational curses, right? So if it's never been addressed, it's going to continue. But how do we bring that family together, and is that family ready to come together?
We stop accepting parents dropping their kids off at mental health appointments without them being seen as well.
Well,
that's what I think.
And well, what we've been doing is we've been integrating groups that we have.
Yeah.
Like instead of keeping the children in one group or the youth and one children isolating their parents in one other one, what we do is at least once a month we try to bring them all together to have an activity and event that's fun. So that they can see each other outside of being stressed and being yelled at and parents feeling burdened, oh, what you doing now kind of thing. Because we have to start regrouping. When COVID first started, when COVID first came around, right, there was a lot of talk about the parents. I can't handle these children. They need to find something for these children to do. I can't take it, right? There was one parent on YouTube talking about she was smoking her weed because she can't handle her own children, right? But then as time started going on, now they don't want to leave the children. Right? So how do we fit into those little nooks and crannies and start creating that synergy? You know, jumping on that synergy to start pulling the family together, because we know the breakdown of the family is where these other interactions are coming in. And it's not a panacea, but
I think we're sort of, one of the things I hear where you all are raising is potential for us is we know we want to add or pay more attention to sort of this preventive and intervening work across a variety of agencies. And I want to encourage us to post this meeting, and we'll do some follow-up, is to share some of these set of ideas, because we want to bring that back to the grants working group, right, as an opportunity for us to take these ideas and say, okay, so what could, as Jenny was describing, this sort of model in your county, like, so, you know, what versions of that, you know, what is the idea around that? Like, what could that look like? And to help to potentially sort of put together some type of sort of, you know, funding opportunity.
Well, and so when I did my introduction of myself in the beginning, I very specifically stated that I run a family-based trauma treatment program, because I think that that's going to be the key with a lot of things is engaging the family and treating the family.
Treating the family, right. And that means that that's a two-generation approach that is intentional, right? Because it's
well, and even with lots of kids now in New York State, they live with grandparents or they live with family members, so it's even more generations than that a lot of times.
And then they have their support systems, the people in their life who provide them the support.
Right. Yeah.
And including them, because they're going to be the ones that the youth need when they're home.
Right.
In the community.
And the ones managing the behavioral issues. Yeah.
So I want to. So as a next step, I want to encourage us to. We're going to follow up in terms of asking for these brainstorming ideas, right? Two, I'm being conscious of time. The other thing we wanted to talk about briefly was, because we're into our last year of our strategic plan. I wanted to see if, you know, to ask JAG members in terms of, you know, how do we want to, what are some initial thoughts around the process that we want to go through in terms of developing a new plan? And you know, for those who may not remember, because it's been so long, is, you know, we went through a process where the YJI was really instrumental in being a sort of an infrastructure to really help us go through a process of developing the strategic plan, where it involved them talking to external experts, talking to us as experts individually and as well as in focus groups, and organizing. I think we ended up spending a day worth really, sort of pulling together what are the important themes and strategies that are relevant for continued juvenile justice reform work. And that was a process that we did our last strategic plan, and for those who are not familiar, that was an internal process that we took. Prior to that, we had an external individual who did a similar thing and sort of pulled things together in such a way that then we reacted to. And so we wanted to open up some space in terms of what are some, are there initial thoughts that folks have around, as we start planning for doing that at some point this year, later on this year, what are some of the initial sort of ideas? I know I want to advocate for us to definitely have some type of in-person, experience where we actually all sit together in the same room to do this.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
I just really want what needs to happen for the youth to happen, because the youth are our future. And God forbid I have to go into a nursing home and and these youth are on this trajectory and there hasn't been anything that's been able to really make a difference. I would be afraid, because that would be the workforce.
Right.
So I'm being selfish. I'm just saying.
The youth is gonna be
because you can have children, but you can have children and think your children don't take care of you, but they have their own lives. So I'm just saying.
I always say that the youth are gonna be taking care of us.
I'm just saying. So I really rather invest in the future now and start that trailblazing.
Right.
That's what we're here for.
And any initial sort of thoughts around sort of the planning process? And if particular things come to mind for folks in Albany and here, we can, we'll make this request via email as well to remind folks to start, even if it means just considering what conditions need to be available for you to get into a strategic planning mindset.
I think your idea of all being in the same room might be really important.
Might be the best way to approach it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Particularly given we can't see y'all can't see us.
Maybe like a retreat.
Yeah, some type of retreat. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
And this work has changed my definition of retreat.
Right. Yes, it's definitely not a true retreat. Any last thoughts that folks have before we have a motion? No. Just to reiterate, our next meeting is June 21st in Albany. I believe it's on our calendars already, the June 21st meeting. So, can I get a motion? Oh, okay.
Hold on one second. Sorry.
All right.
Hi, everybody. This is Giza with the YJI. I have a question about timeline. Having been involved in the planning before, so thank you for reminding us and reminding everybody. Eddie, what are the milestones in terms of the federal requirements and the reality of the work that everybody does and the timeline for programming? When do you need to start meeting about the strategic planning so that you have a plan in place that meets the expectations of the feds and whoever else? Thank you.
We would have to submit it as part of FY24.
Yeah, correct. So next spring.
So yeah, so we'd have to have it done by by spring of 24, which means if we follow a timeline that we did our last round, we would want to have this strategic plan near completion in the winter, going in December of 23.
Hi, this is Trista. I'm just going to jump in and ask if we can push the timeline a little bit sooner than that. We can never control when the feds push the application out. Sometimes it's earlier than the spring, sometimes it's in the fall. Unfortunately, can never control the feds' timeline and when they're going to release things. So I think if you all could be closer to completion by like not December, but maybe September.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
All right.
I'm making the request since, we'll have to like get everything in the application, and then we also have, internal processes that we have to go through before the application is submitted to the feds.
Right. Okay. So that means we really have to change how we're gonna, leading up to June 21st, we're gonna have to set a date prior to that for the retreat. If we want to, because that means having the retreat sometime during the summer, if not sooner. Thanks, Trista.
Hey, listen, I get on the bearer of bad news here, but I know, like Jesus said, there was a lot of work that went into it last time, and, we were already almost a year into the strategic plan before, everything got approved, and so I would like us to be more proactive, because we don't also want to be behind the ball on the funding, because we know what happens when the funding piles up, right, and the time frame for spending. And none of us like turn back.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. All right. So could I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
That's precious. All right, Alan, second. All approve of adjourning for today. Raise your hand or say aye.
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 Any abstentions? Anybody? No. Thank you all for sticking around.
Come on! Now we can see you running out the door.
That's fine.
Thanks for setting the meeting up. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye.